Good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us for this amazing panel, The Revolution of Work, because it's here. My name is Nori Davidson. I'm the CEO of Third Octet, and I'm really pleased that you've all made it out to join us. We have a prize at the end, and you have to be here to win it. We also have some great networking afterwards, and we've got some food and drinks. So hopefully you can stay after the panel discussion and join us for some great conversation and to enjoy some food. It is my honor to introduce our moderator, Marguerite O'neill, who is a trained disruptor. When I first heard that, I thought, oh my goodness, do I even want to talk to her? She's trained in disruption. I thought it was only my teenage kids do that. Marguerite was a pharmaceutical executive and now runs a very, very successful business consulting practice. And with that, Marguerite, over to you.
Thank you, Nori, for that kind introduction. You know, people look at me and say, but you're a nice person, how can you be disruptive? But the questions that I ask are sometimes quite disruptive. So I have been really thrilled to be part of all of this, to be associated with Third Octet. I love the work that you do. You know, the whole vision of betterment of organizations and having technology as the foundation of work, life, and balance really speaks to my values, and I'm very honored to be here. Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here and to be your moderator today. The fear of digital disruption, see, I have to stumble over those words, keeps many leaders up at night. You are here tonight because you know that the traditional brick and mortar workspaces are no longer the norm. Work has changed dramatically, and I think you'll agree with me that's an understatement. According to the London School of Economics Global Leadership Summit Survey, in 2020, only 2 years from now, 50 to 75% of the global workforce will be remote, distributed, flexible, and agile in many, many different ways. Mainstream cloud and mobile technology has made it possible for co-workers to work and communicate and collaborate in real time from anywhere. The revolution of work is underway, and there is no turning back. But in this new paradigm of work, is it actually fulfilling its potential? Is it positively impacting your business? Some large companies have introduced remote work and have not been successful. What were their challenges? I can hear is that somebody's brain going there, thinking, what challenges? Well, what about you? Are you challenged with the rising cost of renting or purchasing office space? As you move to more flexible workspaces for your organizations, are you paying for empty desk space? Some organizations are now weighing the pros and cons of actually keeping their organizations in the office space that they currently use. Are you confident that you can attract and retain younger workers? Millennials are demanding work flexibility for work-life balance and professional growth. And according to Forbes, the quit rate among this group is 26% and rising. Think of your own workforce. In 2 years, 35% of them will probably be millennials. And they're not fans of walls and office cubicles. These skilled collaborators expect to be able to work anytime from anywhere. They'll bring their own devices to work, and they expect you to have the infrastructure to support them and the company policies to accommodate those. Is your business model enabled by the appropriate technology? Some of your employees may be driving this revolution. improve tech tools for working collaboratively, file sharing, online training, liberate employees from the workspace, and it enables them to organize their own schedule. But I bet you are also very concerned about efficiency, productivity, and culture. A work shift survey informs us that over 50% of people report that they're more productive outside of the 9-to-5 workday. So think about that. What can you do as a leader to capture that creative and productive output? What does it take to make an agile workforce model for your organization? The coffee thing stopped sizzling. Tonight, we have a distinguished group of 5 panelists from diverse backgrounds. They'll help us look closely at how to connect technology and your culture in a way that's empowering, improves engagement for collaboration and innovation, and helps provide balance in work and life, and at the same time yields a high level of productivity. So on my immediate left is Jing Mack, who is Sales Director at Citrix Canada. He is a seasoned leader, passionate about helping organizations to reimagine IT. I got so excited when I read that. Imagine, reimagine IT. He works closely with business partners across the world, such as Third Octet, to help leaders to drive business growth and create new ways of working. And beside Ching is Dr. Laura Hambley, who is the founder and president of Work Evolution. An industrial and organizational psychologist, Laura has developed the world's first personality profile for a remote worker. She looks at how people are wired and how to support people to be their best when they work remotely. Laura is sought out internationally for her counsel in selecting and leading remote teams. And to the left of Laura is Robert Lane, managing partner of Robert H. Lane and Associates. He has guided leaders from startups to large, well-known organizations through various stages of their evolution. And Robert, after I got to know Robert, I could say he could arguably be the most connected consultant in Canada, in America, and international organizations. Next, we have Gail Green, owner and president of Emergenetics Ontario. The tools and programs offered by her organization maximize human potential, collaboration, and productivity. She serves many prominent Canadian organizations who are working to take their leadership and individual effectiveness to the next level. And to my far left is Bronwyn Ott, manager of benefits and well-being at Unilever. Bronwyn's work has produced a shining example of a large organization that's getting it right. She has helped to build a culture supported by programs that build resiliency, programs that help people to thrive in an environment of change and disruption. So let's dive right in. Are you ready? Okay. We have 3 rounds of questions that I will direct to the panelists. I expect many of your questions and concerns will be addressed, but if you have a burning question, and I hope you have a few, hold on to it, and then we'll address it later during the question and answer period. I do want to say that I talked with a few of you before we started, and if you have a comment that you feel you want to make at a certain time, just indicate to me that you're interested in saying something, and we'll make sure you get a chance to contribute. Okay? All right. So, Ching, I'll start with you. How would you describe the vision of Citrix for the future of work?
Okay, thanks very much, Marguerite. So the Citrix vision, I think we talked a lot about that. We talked about millennials coming in. There's an expectation of people want to work remotely. There's the choices people need and want, the different devices and everything. From the technology standpoint, there's a lot of complexity out there. Mm-hmm. How do you connect one person from their home via an untrusted internet mm-hmm. and getting into your corporate data? At Citrix, what we do and what we've done in the past 20 some odd years, almost 30 years, is that we power the future of work. We power a better way for you to achieve work-life balance while maximizing productivity. I think we live by that. We embrace that culture, that mobility culture. I can tell you from just earlier today, before this event, I was downstairs at Starbucks. Now I do have an addiction to caffeine, but I was able to work with my remote work environment, my secure digital desk, workspace. That travels with me no matter where I am, and that's what we've been doing, and that we'll continue to do that, and we'll help organizations out there do that. I want to share a little bit of our vision, what happened this week. I'm hiring a sales rep out in Western Canada, and everything went well. I drafted up an offer letter, and in the offer letter, I actually say that, right? Like, I want to highlight the opportunity for you to join a team that's helping to create a world where people can experience work and life their way. So it's not
exciting.
It's not what we do. We live it. That's our mantra.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And when I spoke with you, when we were getting ready for this, what really excited me was when you talked about companies that are scaling up, and how how you were able to make that easier for them, So I think that's part of the overall vision, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think technology will play a core part in the mobile work style. I think it should be an enabler. I think it can do a whole lot. Expand into different markets.
Yeah.
How you can onboard a new employee, open up new office. Quicker. Time to value is quicker.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of value from the technology standpoint.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to ask the rest of the panelists the same question, and that is, what does the vision of future of work mean to you? Laura, can we start with you?
I would say being able to work when and where you're most effective, and being able to work in the locations that you want to work, and not being saddled in a metal box every day driving an hour or more each way to work, which I think is hopefully not the way of the future. I think we spend way too much time commuting. So those would be some examples from me.
Bob, how about you? What does the future of work mean to you?
Well, I've lived through many centuries. Yes, I recognize technology and what it is, but I would like to bring just a few words of reality. Jobs are disappearing. You no longer go to the job now can come to you. But let's remember, you're not all going to be Steve Jobs, you're not all going to be Bill Gates, and you're not going to be Mark Zuckerbergs. But we're creating a generation right now that we better begin to understand. We have some in the area of 35% of our college graduates not going into industry, but going into ARB and rental properties with their computers. And they're building a thing called the world of the application. I hate to tell you that last year in America there were 7,000 companies founded, and 4,100 of those did not last 6 months. And the failure rate of corporations today is very large. So I would like to temper a little bit of your enthusiasm of what it all is going to mean. Yes, it is going to disrupt how you live, but you're going to have to, as you foster your children and your workers around you, you still have to run a business. There has to be an exchange of value. unless we decide that we're going to build a whole socialistic new world, but that, unfortunately, that's not North America. So I bring a little caution. Yes, world is changing. You haven't seen it all yet, but don't please get carried away with what blockchain's going to do or what the smart car is going to do. Please.
I think a lot of us are fearful because our heads go that way, right? So thank you for that. Gail, what do you think? What does the future of work mean to you?
Well, I'm just going to, I have a 14-year-old, and in September, he was going to quit school and become a digital nomad. Because he could move to Thailand, and he could make $12,000 a year by outsourcing products from cheap factories in Thailand and reselling them on Amazon. And he's 14 years old. And it's actually not a bad idea. I said, buddy, not a bad idea, but let's drive for a little more than 12,000. And I'm not putting you on a plane to Thailand tomorrow. But this digital age is going nowhere. The 14-year-olds, the up-and-comers, this is how they think. And this is a global. He knows more about the world at 14 than I know at 50. And it is closing the information that we receive and the way we receive it and what they know is making this planet a very small place, and it's going nowhere. So what does the future of work mean to me? This movement is not going away. So as leaders in the community, we need to figure out, how do we lead this? How do we manage it? How do we make it work for us? And I think that's what it means.
Right. And Bronwyn, what does the future of work mean to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I echo a lot of the things that I've already heard, and I think, Laura, you even took the words out of my mouth, because, we at Unilever believe that, the future of work is working when, where, and how makes you most productive. But I would say there's a lot of things going on, and it's not unique to our industry. I mean, we're in the manufacturing industry, right? And we're seeing robotics, we're seeing AI, we've got gig economy. And with all of this change, and the pace of change is never going to be this slow, comes anxiety, right? And so now we have this anxiety epidemic that's coming about too, which is great because it keeps people like me in work, because I have a background in health and well-being. And I even heard a term coined in an article I read a little while ago around, it's no longer going to be the chief HR officer, it's going to be the chief resiliency officer, right? Because are we now creating resilient employees? Because there's so much change happening, and so how do we make sure that our employees are equipped with that? And so I guess the future of work for me is, where we've got this really resilient workforce. The work is designed, the workforce, the workplaces, the bricks and mortar or not, is designed so that we can be resilient and be our most productive selves. And maybe it's where we no longer have to have well-being programs, or we need to have events like this where we're talking about well-being and why this really matters, because it truly is embedded into the culture. Right? And so it no longer is something that we need to talk about. We're just simply doing it, and we're doing the right things in creating this culture where people can bring their best authentic self to work every day.
So it's interesting, because now I want to be like a Bob and say, I think the well-being is going to be even more important, because if you look at what's happening with university kids right now, the levels of suicide is extremely high. And the universities are trying to turn on a dime to accommodate and provide the support system. So we have to be thinking about things like that as we look to, look to the future. Now, let's talk a bit about, we're going to have 3 rounds of questions. So the first round is all about creating an agile and flexible workplace. How the heck do we do that? So I'll be asking each of the panelists some different questions. So Robert, with your note of caution, how would you describe the disruptive revolution that's actually happening with those leaders that you're working with? I know you work with a lot of startups and very seasoned leaders. What is actually happening out there?
I guess it's really a dichotomy. You have to understand that, let's start at one of the pinnacles of any economic system, and it's the financial world. The financial world has been historically a stable, and this is Canada. You know, we don't realize that really disruptive technology took place really in 2008 when the American real estate market and the American industry collapsed. We did not collapse in Canada. We weathered through it. But the historical issues in the finance world really started in 2008, and they've been struggling ever since. It only this week did the U.S. federal relieve the issues with banks in terms of loan levels, et cetera. Are the banks going to change? It's going to be tough. Because you have to realize that the people at the top of a bank today, he's 62 to 67. He's got his summer cottage in Muskoka. He goes to lunch at the Toronto Club. He doesn't drive any longer from the corner of King and Yonge to the club. He has a Uber black car. All you have to do is watch them lined up there. All right, leave the banks alone. Let's look at manufacturing. It's a tough game today. It's a game of robotics. It's a game where Unifor is having a heart attack right now because the leadership within Unifor, and does everybody know what Unifor is? It's the large union representing the automotive industry today. It was the old automotive, you know, it was the guys there. They're all in their late 50s. They're worried. There's no young kids on the production lines. Okay, so if you're in manufacturing, you got a problem. Let's get down to startups, and that's my favorite topic. I deal with probably 1,000 startups in the province of Ontario right now. Unfortunately, only one is going to succeed. We've got a problem because we have politicians who believe that they give somebody $1,000, that's all they need to do. So you're voting for people in this next election that run a very large thing called the Ontario Centres of Excellence. And if you want to sign up there, there's thousands of kids in those arenas. We've got them all across Canada. We've been building an expectation. Your son wants to go to Thailand. Yeah, I can probably make him $100,000 in Thailand. He thinks he can, and he might, but it may not be long-lasting. Really, the upshot of the whole thing is most of you around this, and I looked at where you came from, most of you are not involved in what I call manufacturing industries. You're in service, more in service areas, or you're in government, or you're HR, or you're working within, but I don't think a lot of you are down on talking to that foreman down, trying to get that truck out today to make that delivery. Or you're the plumber. Have any of you tried to get any work done recently by an electrician or a plumber or any of those things? We're not training our kids. I wish we were.
But you know, Bob, just if you think about manufacturing, a lot of that is automated now. You know,
Pardon?
Most companies that have manufacturing organizations, it's technology throughout the years that's actually changing the nature of it. So I think whatever industry you look at in some form or fashion, technology plays a big part of it. So I'm going to move on to Ching
But it's
now.
not going to, you're saying, is technology going to take away jobs? No. We have more jobs today that are vacant than I've ever seen in the last 10 years.
Yes.
What we
Yes.
don't have is people who were not trained in the skills that we should have started 10 years ago.
Good point, and Gail has something to say.
I would agree with that, Robert, and I'm not sure that you and I would agree on everything, but certainly around the skill-based professions, I believe that automation is taking away jobs, say certain types of jobs that we would think in the manufacturing industry. But there is absolutely a gap between skill-based work and skill-based workers, and companies will suffer if we don't do something to educate even families
Yeah.
Because nobody wants their son to be the plumber. They want them to go to university. They want them, so you know what, I agree with you. There is absolutely a skill-based gap.
I have a plumber's license. Does anybody in this room have a plumber's license? Do you know why I got a plumber's license? Because I thought someday, and when I got old and gray and I didn't make enough money, I could go and have a job. And I've gone out and been a plumber because it's fun. So I'm saying, and she's very right, your children are not being, they want to be that coder. They want to code and make that app.
So there's two, but I would agree to that to one point, but there is a reality of the other side that we have to lead, manage, and move forward with as well.
Yes.
And so, you know, I work with the HR committee at the Mississauga Board of Trade, and this is actually one of the issues that we talk about, that gap in skill base. But we're also going to have a generation of digital nomads, whether we like it or not. And it's not even actually what the parents bring to it, it's the amount of information that they receive on a day-to-day basis that gives them this global perspective, and it's real, and it's there. And whether we like it or not, we have to deal with what's coming down the pipe.
And in order to move forward, we have to innovate. So Ching, over to you. How has technology helped organizations to innovate?
Okay, first and foremost, Bob, you got to come with me. I'm doing a new bathroom at our house. Can't find a good plumber. No. You know, I think first and foremost, you know, when you look at technology and when you look at the role of IT in technology, IT has always been treated as a cost center to a lot of big organizations. So it's always costing this. I think, you know, IT needs to step up to the big boys table.
Yes.
To the C-suite, to the executives, right? Make those decisions together as business partners.
Yes.
Until they are able to do that, get that seat on the big boy table, it's going to be an uphill battle. But when you get there and you're able to sell that vision to the organization, to the rest of the board and executives, I think that can open up many, many doors. I think we talked about, you know, expansion to new markets, right? We can, you know, for us, specifically at Citrix, we just moved recently in Canada from a 25,000 square foot facility because no one was using it. Everyone was working remotely. We consolidate that. Now we're in a 7,000 square foot facility, right? So we're saving money that way. So technology can enable that. You know, attract and retain talent. People coming into, you know, work these days, there's an expectation to have choice of device that they want to use, where they want to work. You know, they don't want to work 9 to 5. They want to work, you know, 7 till 10, but not in a row.
Yeah.
Right. But as long as they get their job done, that's the important thing. And I think when you have the infrastructure, the technology, you know, you can achieve all that. And then the byproduct of that is obviously the happy employee, the productive employee, the trusted employee.
Yeah. So Laura, why do managers or leaders often shy away from introducing these agile workforces?
Oh, so definitely it's fear of how will I know they're working if I can't see them, fear of the work not getting done effectively, fear of losing control. But there's a fundamental problem with that fear in that the correlation between someone's butt in a seat and productivity is not necessarily a strong correlation. And we always ask our clients, okay, if that's your fear of how do I know my people are working, we say, how do you know they're working when they're in the office? Are you going over their shoulder and looking at them every minute? How do you know they're working? And then there's a pause. And usually they don't have clear metrics for performance. They don't have clear goals and objectives or KPIs. So it makes us step back in time and realize that we have a bigger problem here in terms of performance management and goal setting. And I think this whole flexible, agile, and distributed work, it unveils a greater problem in how we manage and lead people in organizations. So I would say trust is the number one thing that I would usually say, but it's the fear behind the trust. And it unveils this problem that we have in terms of a paucity of effective, strong leadership, that's going to be something that we really need to work hard on in order to make agile and flexible workplaces thrive, because working in these ways is tougher. It takes more intentionality, more planning, better communication, tech savvy. It takes all of these skills, and leaders better be up for the challenge, because I totally agree with what's being said. It's not going away. It's only here to stay and to grow.
Yeah, I hear you. And, I just don't want us to lose Ching's point when he said, some people have to pull up their big boy pants, right? Or big girl pants. Yeah. Because I was listening to this, this interview recently, and this CEO was saying, if your IT person comes in and is telling you something different from what you want, throw them out. And I thought, how disrespectful is that, first of all? But it's the IT person coming in with the big boy pants on, ready to have the conversation, right? So, we will be going into talking about skill sets in a little while. But first, Bronwyn, what was it that happened at Unilever for them to actually take this on? Like, what was it that shifted it?
So I think there needs to be a recognition, right, that things need to change. And so, we do a lot of things. We've got manufacturing, we're selling to stores. The reality is the way we do business changes. We no longer go shopping necessarily to brick and mortar stores. We have to look at the whole way that we do work, and we need to evolve and shift, right? Because everything, and we've got, as I mentioned, robotics, coming into manufacturing sites. We're trying to figure out how do we sell to the online consumer, which looks very different than someone goes to the bricks and mortar stores. And so I think step number one is the organization needs to say, we need to do things differently. We need to do things faster, better, right? We as an organization need to be agile and nimble. And so if we as an organization are going to do that, then we need to have agile, nimble employees working within this organization. And so I think, that was, I can't say that was the reason why. We also have a very strong culture of well-being globally at Unilever, right? And so this idea of being able to bring your best authentic self to work is very much rooted in our culture. And we have got the support right from leadership globally to support this with a full well-being strategy in place.
So the mindset then of people was nurtured for many years to get you to this point.
Yeah, it was absolutely something that did not happen overnight. This has been a work in progress, right? And it continually evolves as the organization evolves, as the external environment and landscape evolves, then we've had to evolve alongside with it.
Was there,
Go ahead.
Was there a moment in time that you can point that change? Was there a change in leadership, or the culture? It comes from the top.
It comes from the top, and when you look at Unilever's roots, I mean, Lord Lever made soap, right? And his mandate was that he wanted to make sure that people's health was protected. And so, when you think about some of our roots even and where we came from, it has always been a part of our culture. We're a very sustainable organization. We have a Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, and part of that is to improve the lives of 1 billion people around the world by 2020, and we believe that starts internally with us as employees. And so, we know that our purpose brands grow at a faster rate. Our purpose-driven brands, like think of Dove, right? And the movement around self-esteem with women as an example. And so, if we know this is working externally, we have to take a look internally as well, right? And so I think, as I said, it's always been a part of who we are as Unilever, but it has morphed, right? As things evolve, we've evolved alongside.
And Gail, what personality attributes do you feel really enable this effective agile workforce?
I think around the leadership piece, that we set the stage, we don't act on it. That when it comes to personality, any personality can be a leader. It's about where you lead from and understanding that and knowing yourself and being able to live with the discomfort of the disruption. So I'm going to tell you a little story. In 2009, Psychology Journal did a study with college students, and they used sororities and fraternities to create homogeneous groups to solve mysteries. 20 minutes into the exercise, they injected new people into the groups. 2 of the groups, they put somebody from the same sorority or somebody from the same fraternity. They would think the same, they would be the same demographic. In the other groups, they injected people from different sororities and different fraternities. Interestingly enough, in the results, what they discovered was that the homogeneous groups reported more confidently that they had better results. They were absolutely confident because the process was smooth, they all got along, they understood each other. Of course they had better results, but they didn't. They were right 29% of the time. The diverse groups struggled a little more in the process, and they were right 61% of the time. In order to impact change, we have to embrace the discomfort. And as leaders, that's our reality. And so how do we create the stage where people can bring their slice of genius in some creative, disruptive way for collective genius to really push things forward? And so I think the Agile and Flexible Workplace is a part of this.
Yes.
It's how we deal and how we get to know these employees, how we know ourselves, how we work with them, how we help them bring their slice of genius to the table is crucial.
Yes. Okay, so now we're going to think about the skill sets that are needed in this agile work environment. So Ching, I'll start with you. How has technology changed selection and advancement for an organization? You know, you talked about just hiring a new person and talking about the vision of the organization and so on. How has that changed?
It shouldn't change. So I think, you know, if the technology is going to be successfully deployed across the enterprise, across the organization, the experience should be a great user experience. It should be simple. It should be consistent right across from no matter where you work, what device you're working from, you know, what connection you're at. That experience, whether you're in the office, it should be the same everywhere else. So if you can deliver that experience out
Yep.
to those users, you know, it doesn't matter who you choose. I mean, technology shouldn't be the deciding factor.
Have you changed how you look for certain skill sets, or are there any particular skill sets that you really value at Citrix?
Well, I think when I look for the people, you know, obviously I'm in a sales capacity, so I'm looking for very, you know, specific types of skill set. But I think being able to work remotely, because my team is right across Canada. I have 3 people here in the GTA. The rest are spread right across. So I think, you know, being a self-starter, being able to work remotely, obviously, and in a collaborative way as well. So those are the things that I look for.
And you know, you talked about sales. Has the whole way of selling changed over time? Are people required to pull on those big boy pants in a different way?
I think selling has changed a little bit, right? I think you step in front of a customer 8 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, they know your product better than you do already. This Google thing, I think, is going to catch on. So, so I think the selling the value that you bring to the table, the rapport you build with the customer, the trust you develop with the customer, that won't change. I think, you know, you will become even more consultative as you go on. But as far as the education piece, that's a little bit less.
So Laura, in your view, what are the most important attributes and skills that should be developed for leaders of remote teams?
Oh, there's quite a few, but something that definitely pops into mind is learning to have effective meetings from a distance. So honing in on your distributed meeting management skills, because meetings from a distance take certain skills to facilitate, to organize, to keep people engaged, to plan, to follow up on. And I mean, back to my point earlier, meetings in traditional co-located workplaces suck, basically. And then you take it in a distributed context, and it even gets more challenging. So
Yes.
becoming a really great distributed team leader would be one. Becoming much more planful and organized when it comes to managing a distributed team. So you can't get away with lazy leadership or not planning ahead. You have to be more organized and more planful and intentional. And then one more area would be what we call communication medium match, which is learning to choose the correct communication medium for your purpose. So having the automatic reflex of, okay, this should be a jammer conversation or jabber, or this should be a Slack communication. This should be an email, and that should be a meeting, and that should be a video conference, and just learning about what media is right and becoming well versed in different communication media as they come to the fore, right? Learning about the tools that are out there, like Ching is talking about.
Yes, yes.
Being up to speed and learning how to use them properly.
And how do you create intimacy? I mean, many of us watch the royal wedding, and, you know, the touching, the hand holding, all of those actually drew us into them. How does a leader touch their people across the miles? You know, how do they create that intimacy?
They show gratitude, they show appreciation, they take the time to ask the person about their life outside of work. They take the time to get to know the person, no matter if you're in the same city or you're across the globe. You have to build that human connection to build trust and to build the relationship.
So meeting management would include that little bonding time as well at the start or the finish.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good. And Bronwyn, can everyone actually be successful in an agile workplace in your view? Does it suit everyone? Like,
So-
what's been your experience?
So it's a tough question, right? Because there's many different personality styles. But what I wanted to say is, like, not every job is suited for agile work. And so if I think about our current organization, so yes, I embrace agile. I love working agile and being able to structure my day based on when I have energy, you know, what my needs are in terms of my life outside of work. But if you are working in a call center, may or may not, depending on the technology, may or not be available. In a manufacturing environment, I can tell you it's extremely difficult, right? And this is one of the struggles, is that we end up with a very agile work environment for our salaried kind of office sales environment, but in the manufacturing sites, it becomes very difficult. So one of the things that we've done is I've gone across the country and virtually trained people on our well-being strategy. And so we talk about so our well-being strategy is physical, mental, emotional, and purposeful well-being. And so some of the things we talk about is energy and how you use your energy levels and your circadian rhythm to structure your days. And are you doing high energy tasks when you have high energy versus are you doing, you know, is there an energy mismatch there? We talk about distractions in terms of technology. So although it's very important that we have access to all of these tools, we need to learn how to minimize and manage the distractions so that we can actually be productive, particularly when we've got those high energy levels, right? And so how does it all kind of come together? But what I hear when I go out to our manufacturing sites is we don't have that luxury. So it's all great, you know, when you're in sales and you're in control of your day, or when you're in HR and you can decide what you want to do. But when a line needs to be shut down, it needs to be shut down. And if I'm at home, I'm getting called and I need to be there. And so this becomes a little bit from a culture perspective, how do you manage that? Because it's a little bit of the haves and the have-nots, right?
Yes.
And it's not equal across the organization. And so, yes, we can absolutely figure out, you know, ways to be agile, but it's not going to look the same in every environment. It's not going to look the same for every employee. And so I think that's kind of my call out, and just recognizing that. But where you can build in the opportunities to be agile, I think is really important, or to have some sort of say in how you do your work, when you do your work. And so it's a little piece of agile when you don't have that full luxury.
Do you have meetings that go across different geographic locations? And how are those handled? If anyone can answer this question.
So I can speak for us, right? We're a global organization, and so sometimes I will be on a phone call, and there are people from, Europe, from India, from all over the place. And so, I think we're mindful, and we understand that there's sometimes I'm going to be on a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes I'm going to be on one at 8 o'clock at night, where we can divide and conquer and kind of have two options. Then we will do that as well, just depending on how many people we need to get. But that's the nature, and we're global, but we also run a 24/7 operations in the plants as well, right? And so just having that flexibility, but I think this is where the give and take comes in. And so, yes, okay, fine, I had to be, we're going to be at one of our plants at 7 a.m. next week, and I'll be there all day so I can cover all 3 shifts. But you know what? If my son or daughter have a field trip that I want to go on, then I'm able to take that time, and there's no questions asked, right? So I think it's a little bit of give and take, and so it's just the mindset that you have around it.
Yeah, thank you. Bob, how might new entrants to the workforce prepare themselves for ensuring their future advancement?
Well, I think we in Canada are a little soft. I'm going to say that right up front. We're too worried about where we're not going. We're not a global country anymore. We only have one major corporation that is Canadian, that is global today, and it's called Magna. The rest of them are branch plants, and I've worked for them. My very first job was at Unilever, and because I spoke Spanish, I ran the ice cream plant in Mexico City called Yum Yum. And the only reason I ran it was that the general manager down there had a bunch of ponies at the racetrack, and he spent more time at the racetrack, and I'll tell you all the story about that someday. I don't think technology has changed a whole lot of things. I think what you have to do as a person is get involved in what your business is all about, what your leadership capabilities are in a business. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an engineer, but I've run Commodore worldwide. I built Apple with Steve and Pixar and a whole bunch of other companies which you know. I'm also the guy that brought this disposable diaper to the world. It used to be called Flush-A-Pies. It was built here in Canada, right out on Weston Road. We failed with it in Canada because we thought we could tear it up and put it in the toilets, and we plugged up the toilets in Rosedale. Come on. But we figured out how to make it work. So in business, it isn't all about technology. It is about you, what you want to do, how you want to be involved, how you want to involve yourself with other people, how you want to help your person beside you. Don't get wrapped up in Facebook and all of these great sure, they're tools, but nothing beats a face-to-face communication if you want to get an idea or a thought across to somebody. And trust me, you're not going to make sales only on the internet. Please. It's only going to go so far. Somebody's got to deliver it. Somebody's got to bring it back home. I run right at the moment, if any lady in the audience buys shoes from Nordstrom's, I run that right now at a Buffalo. Those shoes come from Italy in big containers through the Port of Montreal, all duty-free, into Buffalo, into a warehouse. We take them out, we put them in boxes, and you order them. Average shoe price, $550. They go up to $25,000. We have shoes for you. We get 40% of those shoes back. Somebody has to deal with that. That's not technology. That takes a person to look at the box, take it out of the box, and put it there. There isn't a robot in the world that's going to do that for me. So I'm not worried about all this technology. I'm not. You're all going to have jobs if you'll learn how to use technology and not think it is a duplication for something which you're born with. The biggest computer in the world is right there.
Well said.
That's what the game's about.
Well said.
Sorry, I'm sounding like
And
an
Gail.
old man tonight.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, I do agree with you. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No, I'm not.
Right, let's not, because,
The
you
kids
know
are
what, the
great.
the leadership wisdom of time still is the same.
Yes.
You know, as a leader, it's our job to inspire the people who work for us. We have to make sure that we execute on our highest priorities. We have to provide some clarity, get commitment from our people. You know, work in enabling synergistic environments and hold them accountable.
Yeah.
You know, that still exists. But in the new reality, that will exist with somebody in Thailand, somebody in Bogota, and somebody. So now what I need as a leader to do is still take the wisdom of leadership from the ages and work with Ching to make sure that we have the technology to do the best job we can to create that structure and make sure that we don't lose the leadership of the ages, but we bring it, use technology to our advantage, because the global community is not going anywhere.
That's right. And would you do anything about hiring practices? Would you change
Yes.
approaches? So what can we do to disrupt hiring practices to make sure we yield the right results?
You know, I think we need to hire differently. I think we need to, you know, there can be a sense of hiring likeness. We tend to get along in an interview situation with someone, hey, they really get me, that's great, we're going to hire, we're going to work, we're going to do a great job. You know, we might want to look at how can we, in our hiring practices, maybe even get some imperial data on what they bring to the table, cognitively, how they behave, and do it without a name attached to it. So we remove some of that unconscious bias. And before we even sit in front of somebody in a hiring practice, have some data about who that is and what they bring, and is it diverse? So as a leader, first, rule number one, principle number one is know yourself. Know where your strengths are, know where your gaps are. And then make sure that those are absolutely identified, and then make sure that you're willing to go to the place of discomfort in the hiring process to complete the cognitive diversity on your team. So I would say the one person that answers the question totally different than everybody else, that's the person you should be looking at.
And I think you're speaking to really looking into the future as you hire, because you want the people who are the thinkers, like Bob was saying, that are going to actually think differently, do things differently, rather than just, you know, status quo answers. Bronwyn, you had a question?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation, and we've actually started using AI as part of our recruitment process. And so as part of it, you are requested to submit a video. And so they're looking, right? And so it does take the bias out of it. And it also makes recruitment much easier, because by the time you're talking to someone, you've kind of already done all the preliminary stuff. So from a workload perspective and streamlining and efficiency, it just seemed to make sense as well. And so I think, you know, that's where organizations are going. That's absolutely where we're going, and we've taken that leap already. The other thing I just want to say is, you know, in my current role, I had 9 interviews, and I never met my boss until my first day of work.
Oh, really?
And so, you know, when you talk about taking away the FaceTime and sitting across from somebody and someone saying, well, I really like those shoes, so I think she's going to be a great employee. I had one Skype interview, and that was my second time meeting with her. And she is, by far, the best boss. We have got the best relationship, even though she sits in a different country, and I never met her until my first day of work. And so I do think we do need to think differently, right? We do need to kind of remove ourselves from the unconscious, you know, making sure there are no unconscious bias there. But I think we need to think about what this looks like going forward, because it's going to change. It's going to look very different.
So that ends round 2, talking about skill set. Does anyone have any comment they want to make? Or yes, Hilda?
You've disrupted my thinking, and I'm sitting here thinking the generation now has been brought up to really feel very, very comfortable technologically, but not necessarily from the people skills. These people have worked their way up and used their people skills. How will those people today who are graduating, who are the leaders of the future, who have embraced technology, be able to use their people skills to be leaders globally?
From an HR perspective, I think, we need to think about leaders very differently, right? And so what has happened to date is that people they move through their career, and as they master a skill, they become a people leader and take on more responsibility, and they take on a bigger team. But that is not, we know, right? I do workplace health and well-being, and we know that if you have a bad leader, that's why people tend to leave organizations, right? Is because of their manager, and that there's a poor fit maybe there, or poor leadership style. So I think, one of the things in my groups of people we talk about is, what does success and what does a career path look like? So if I'm really great at my job, I may be a really crappy leader. And so we need to come up with different streams, right? And so I could excel my career and just be a subject matter expert, and I could have an entire career out of that, right? Or I could have a career out of being a people leader. But right now, we're trying to crumple them together, and we're trying to say, as you become a really good subject matter expert and really great at your job, now you're going to be a people leader. Those are completely different skill sets, and I think we need to separate that out. And so, and it's not going to necessarily solve the problem, but there are people who are inclined to have more of the soft skills and be personable and excel in that area. And so how do you make that a career versus someone who's just technologically intelligent and smart? And I think that may help. I don't know. I guess
And Gail, do your assessments evaluate some of that?
Yeah, we can. We can evaluate some of that. I got to just make a comment, though. I totally agree with you. But I think millennials get picked on sometimes, because there are lots of millennials that I work with they're so great. And companies of millennials that are working together. And I was at this luncheon with Kelly, you were there, Hilda.
Kelly,
and she's one of the top 10 millennials. To watch, right, up-and-comers in the country. And she talked about the structure she puts in place in her company around technology. Look, when I was a kid, my mother had a Sara Lee cake in the fridge that you couldn't touch just in case company dropped over, right? And she told me to stay off the phone. Now, the pace of what's happening right now is a lot faster than that, but really there's no difference. That technology then, I got reprimanded because it was a telephone. And people dropped over and they had a cup of tea and a piece of cake. Now, the pace is faster. So we just have to figure out how we're going to be flexible and agile in that. Mm-hmm. Right? And there's no difference. There's lots of, like I said, millennials, I'm on your side.
I agree completely. My business partner is a millennial, and she has a great personality, and she's very personable. I don't like lumping together a whole generation. I think there's common themes in generations, but too often we lump a generation together, but there's way more diversity within a generation than there are similarities, right?
And here's what's great about the millennials is they're not attached to the bottom line as much as they are attached to contributing. That's one of the common themes you find there. And if you give them, with the millennials I've hired, if you are flexible and agile with their work, and you respect their frame of reference, where they're coming from. So with, what we do, yes, we can figure out who is maybe more talented in this area and has some strengths there. But really what I find in profiling all the generations is they all exist everywhere.
And they develop people skills in different ways. The people skills might not look the same as the people skills that Bob developed early on, but they're still people skills, but they take place in different media and in different ways. So I think it's just, I think nothing replaces face-to-face, absolutely, but I think you can still develop into a great people person and a people leader without having to be face-to-face every day.
Right. Bob?
But I have a problem.
Very quickly.
We live in a corporate life.
Yes.
My job today is teaching the millenniums what a balance sheet is all about. Mm-hmm. How do they borrow money? I spend tremendous of my time, don't I? Right there. One of the most successful wealth management people in Canada. I know how successful he is because I've helped him. But I have to teach them what the goddamn balance sheet's all about because they can't get, millenniums are great, but you got to get into the corporate structure. You remember, what we did over the last 25 years is to gut what we used to call middle management. And Procter & Gamble and Unilever and all the big giants, they don't make much anymore. They design things. When I went to Apple, we designed the Apple. But we very quickly learned, we never made a thing in Commodore. Everything in Commodore is made offshore. We were the very first company that produced everything, and all we did was put it in a box.
Okay,
That's,
so let's move on.
that's how you buy things today, folks.
I know. So let's move on to
That's
this.
our problem.
Let's move on. Yes, yes.
It's been an interesting conversation. Really enjoyed it so far. A couple of things came up to mind.
Would you like to use the mic? I'm not sure if we can get that.
So, as I was saying, it's been an interesting conversation for me, and a couple of things that has come to mind. So there's a lot of talk of the word agile being used. I guess I've been working at home for the last 5 years. I work for an organization that's also a global organization, and I guess we could say that we're extremely agile. That'd be IBM. For those of you familiar, new company, 100-something years old, still new. Anyways, so what I'm getting at is that to me, the word agile within an organization means a lot more than flexibility of technology allowing you to work from home. One of the things I do, 3 hats I wear at IBM. I'm the principal talent acquisition partner for Canada. I also am a design thinking coach and an Agile Scrum Master for IBM. So for me, Agile has to do with an Agile culture, an Agile workforce, and it really, let me backtrack. One of the things that's changed with us recently, we've become the largest design thinking firm in the world. And a lot of our spaces are changing into becoming co-located again. And it's for specific reasons, and you mentioned one of them. There's certain things that you can't change. That has to happen face to face. And when you're doing design thinking, the kind of cooperation and the innovation that comes out of that only doesn't happen, virtually, right? So we actually create open spaces, not cubicle spaces. That's the old cube farm, doing away with all that. And that really helps with innovation. But leadership came up to it a lot. And Agile, does anybody understand Agile from a Scrum point of view? That's a massive culture change. First of all, and this is not on behalf of IBM personally, because I do a lot of executive coaching, leadership coaching as well. Leadership, as we understand it, is dead. All right? Period. There's no longer, right? There's no such thing anymore that a leader, in today's complexity, can lead anybody. The Hopi had a saying many years ago, and it went like this: the leader you're looking for is you. That's what you're waiting for. So leadership needs to be democratized. And one of the reasons that makes Agile so successful, is Agile teams, is democratized leadership, right? The collaborative teams come up with solutions that the leader can't. They far outgun them and outclass them in terms of education, collaboration. This is a knowledge worker economy. The old scientific management that Taylorism gave us and the scripted workforce, and you do this and put a nut bolt on there all day. If you don't like it, I'm going to replace you in 5 minutes. Good luck. That's done. It's finished. So one of the things we adopt is we have servant leadership, transformational leadership, and it's deliberately disruptive leadership. Our leadership is more about empowering you to bring the best out of you. What do you need? The command and control structures of yesteryear are finished, and those companies that are still hanging on to that, never mind about what you said about I'm afraid of them not doing their work. That's still very command and control, right? That mentality won't work anymore, and especially with millennials, they're very purpose-driven and mission-driven, and that's more about inspiration than it is motivation. Right? So it's been an interesting. But thank you for the.
And I think you're speaking about the spectrum of leadership, right? So IBM is there. Trust me, I'm married to 2 at different times, IBMers. So I saw the evolution of IBM when they split apart, became Celestica, and where they are today. So thank you so much for that, bringing that in. And that moves us into round 3, where we're going to be talking about distributed teams and cultures. So perfect entree to that. So Gail, How do we create psychological safety for better innovation and communication?
So I think it actually speaks to what this gentleman talked about there. The psychological safety is allowing people, I talked about their bringing their collective slice of genius to the table and being okay with that. With what we do, I've sat across tables where maybe where the leaders gap, the very person who filled that they were about to fire. And that's not what you want. You need to so I like that, to democratize leadership. I've never heard that exact term, but the CEO of Pixar, he says, look, nobody's ever going to follow me. These are smart people. Nobody's going to follow me here.
I didn't even know what they were talking about.
He said, they're smart people. They
ever
want to
talk to
come with their
Castlebaum?
ideas. They want to come with their ideas. So what was your question again? I think I've lost my train.
How do we create psychological safety?
So to create psychological safety is allowing people to bring their ideas to the table in a manner where they will not be criticized, that they will be accepted, giving them a chance to voice those, debate them robustly if they need to, quietly if they need to, but creating it where it can come and they know that it's okay because everybody's looking for the collective genius in the end.
And that is the culture that you create in order to enable that. Yes.
Absolutely. And 7 out of 10 innovative products will fail.
Yes.
Right? So we have to fail. So, you need to create the culture. You bring a disruptor in, and if the culture is not prepared for that, they're going to be at the water cooler and going, well, failed again. But really, that's what we need to do. We learn nothing. Our brain only changes when we fail.
But we need to fail fast.
Yes.
Right? We need to fail fast and get back on track and then
Right.
reroute ourselves.
That's right.
And in the right culture, we can do that. Right? With we can say, oh, that didn't work. Then we become agile and we move on to our next one. Absolutely.
And that brings us to a conversation now that Bronwyn will lead, which is, your organization encourages clear conversations about performance. So can you tell us more about that? How does that support a distributed workforce?
So, we are a performance-based organization. It's extremely fast-paced. I was talking to a couple people before I started. I came from public health into government, into banking, and then into CPG. And I can tell you what I did in my first 3 months at Unilever, I probably did 3 years in banking, right? Because that's just really how fast it moves. So you do need to have this performance-based culture mindset in order to thrive there. I think it's around, we're all adults. And so we talk about performance. I wouldn't say we over talk about it though, but there's an expectation. This is what needs to be delivered. You're an adult, figure out how to deliver it. And we'll help you. We're going to create the environment. We're going to give you the resources. We're going to give you the tools. And going to, your conversation around what does the workplace look like? So we're redesigning our workplace right now. And so we do have zones where we're collaborative, right? Because we know we need to innovate and we need to collaborate and come together. But we also know that we need focused zones, right? Because there's times where we need to work in solitude and we really need to get something done, whether it be a report, a policy we're writing, whatever. And then we have vitality zones as well, because we know that we need to refresh, re-energize, right? And focus on our own well-being so that we can then be productive. So what I'm really trying to do with my portfolio from the well-being side is, well-being has kind of gone on a journey. So we started with disease management to wellness to well-being, and now it's sustainable high performance, right? So are you at your best the majority of the time? Can you sustain it? And I'm not talking just at work. I'm talking about in life in general. So, as an organization, I think we attract those people because of the environment, because of the pace of work, because of our programs. But we need to make sure now that people don't overtax themselves, right? And so in a 24/7 world where it's agile and we've got the technology, people tend to overcommit, overwork, and don't take enough time for themselves, because we attract those kind of people in this environment. And from a well-being program, I need to say, take time for you. It's okay to go for your lunch. It's okay to take your vacation, because we tend to be always on. And so that's kind of the paradox that I'm navigating right now, is how do you make sure that people are making themselves a priority so that they can maintain it and live a very, a life where they put themselves first.
Yeah. Yes, Bob?
I really want you to, every company that is very successful is a benevolent dictatorship. I want you to think about that for the moment. I want you to think about who are the top number 5 companies in the world today, and it is not Unilever, it is not Procter & Gamble, and it's not General Motors. They're driven by 5, probably the worst individuals you'd ever want to get to meet. So I'm going to have to tell you that if you're going to be successful, it isn't all about wellness, it isn't all about having fun, because business is a tough game.
How do you define success?
Right.
Well, that's right. But the world is out there, and right now, your economy is being driven by very successful companies. You're talking about technology, and the 5 biggest technology companies today, trust me, you don't want to meet Mark Zuckerberg, because he's the bully. And so was Steve. Although Steve, you could get along with Steve. I was a bully too. That's how we drove Commodore. We didn't get to be a $7 billion company and driving our friends at IBM out of the PC Junior business way back. So there has to be a balance, and I worried a little bit. I said right in the very beginning, we cannot be too soft. We've got to understand that, yeah, we got all this technology, but we're going to have to build in some muscle into our business relationships.
I remember a time when a project plan, an IT project plan, had nothing in it to do with communication, about people and all of that. I remember challenging that. So we've come a long way since those days.
Yeah.
We are looking, as Bronwyn said,
Maybe
there's
we
2
flung too
sides.
far. I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's right. So I want to talk a little bit about trust. So Laura, what do you think it takes to build that trust in environment? You mentioned that earlier. So tell us more about that.
Well, I think that trust is earned in 2 different ways. I think getting to know people as human beings, and that's why I think having FaceTime is really important if and when you can, especially at the beginning of bringing a team together or a project together. Bringing them face to face helps build that personal relationship, because you get the small talk, you get the social time, etc., that is tougher from a distance.
So how do we build that cognitive dissonance of challenge, which Gail talked about earlier, and that FaceTime that we're trying to create, whether through technology or face-to-face? Like, how do we pull that together?
I think you need a strong foundation of trust before you can have healthy disagreement or debate or radical candor or whatever you want to call it. And you develop trust also by delivering on what you say you're going to deliver and communicating with others if you can't deliver it.
Yes.
That's how you build trust. And by delivering and by being, developing relationships and delivering on your commitments, then you can start to challenge and debate and disagree with some of the things that are being said beside you, but do it in a way that the relationship isn't going to be damaged from it.
Yes. And how do you do that when you're remote? So how do you build that strong collaboration where people can be so far apart and still, challenge?
Well,
Gail?
again, you build the trust, you build the relationships, and then you give them the tools and the technologies when they are apart to collaborate and communicate and get things done via the technology while bringing in the FaceTime when it's needed, right?
And it speaks to what you said earlier about frequency and choosing the right technology to use at certain times.
Exactly. It's
To
all of that.
Yes. So
Yeah.
all the techniques that you would have used in the past have to be used in the same way. Meaning, if you would have been bringing your team together to talk about something, you have to do it even if they're remotely, right
Exactly.
away, to act on things right away, right?
Yes, don't let it fester.
That's
yeah,
right.
All those things.
Oh, I was gonna make a
Gail
comment.
wanted, and then Bronwyn.
I was going to make a comment that I've heard from some leaders that having remote teams has actually helped the relationship with the employees, because what they'll do is they will have team meetings and you need your IT to help connect you all. But then they'll also have conversations one-on-one without the distractions of the office. And once you remove all that, because in the chaos of the day-to-day, it's one-on-one with technology. And maybe it can be face-to-face, but they're getting to know their employees actually better than they did when they were in the office because of that one-on-one contact that can come. So I think as a leader, you have to plan out how intentional you're going to be to create the structures that are going to maintain those relationships. And there's always character and competence. So on the character side, to make sure that you are grounded and trustworthy and competent, and if you're in a leadership role, but then the respecting of the differences. But I think you can still, in remote situations, create very good relationships.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you. So just one more question, because I know it's probably on some people's mind. In terms of trust, can you tell us, Ching, a bit about the security and how that's been used for a trustworthy organization or infrastructure?
Whatever. So I think, to finish the thought on trust, I think if you don't communicate properly, if you don't communicate effectively, consistently, you'll never get that. I think, when there's a disagreement, someone's not seeing the other person's point of view. I think as a leader, you need to, take it high level, say, this is our goal, this is what we need to do, there's a difference here, but, if you can't communicate properly to your team and sell that vision top down, there will be conflict. For me, like most of my team are remote, so I make sure that I have a team meeting frequently, once a week, once every couple weeks, but the one-on-ones with the employees happens consistently every week. Whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, whatever it takes. But if you don't have that consistent motion, it's harder to build that trust, that relationship, spanning 3,000 miles from one another.
Okay.
Now, getting back to the technology side,
Yes.
I think to work remotely, to enable everyone to have flexible work schedule, if you cannot protect your intellectual property, if you cannot protect your customers' database, if you cannot protect your secret sauce, right? That will never work. So we have the technology that enable that. The way, there's a lot of technologies out there, endpoint technologies to protect your devices, this and that, right? We look at technology a little bit differently in the sense that it's an access point. It's the contextual access. So how are you getting into your corporate applications and data? If this employee is working from the office within the company's firewall on a trusted company-issued device, well, he or she should be able to get access to all the application data, right? Providing that role enables them to do that. But if that person is logging in from, their personal laptop at a Starbucks, maybe they can't get access to all the application. Maybe they can't save it to a local drive. Maybe they can't print or copy and paste. So depends on your security policy. We can control very little or just lock it completely down. So somewhere in between is the right the right mix. I think when it works, I think there's a balance. If it's too restrictive, too locked down, the program won't work, and people will go around to find different ways of doing it. So, and I don't think we want that. So I think those policies needs to be established early on and clearly communicated.
Very good. Okay, so that takes us through the questions, and I think you probably have some questions now for us. Does anyone have a question? Yes. Would you like to go to the mic? So first, tell me your question, and then tell me who you'd like to answer it.
This is just for the general panel. Like, I was just thinking while I was sitting and listening to you guys, I was wondering, is someone born or to be agile? Like, is all this agile and freelancer and all that workforce or labor force, you wonder sometimes whether someone is actually built to be agile and a freelancer and someone is not. So how could you train someone to be agile? Or are people born to be agile workers? So I'm not sure.
Gail is going to answer that.
Well, I'd just like to take a stab at it. So my company is called Emergenetics, so it's emerging genetics. So we're all born with genetic predispositions, but they emerge from our life experiences. And with neuroscience and neuroplasticity, we can absolutely change the way we are. So it's really about rooting yourself and understanding what frame of reference you come from. And what do you want? And then taking okay, where do I want to go? What direction do I want it? And if you don't align, you can change that. Or if your job doesn't align. So we can always change it, but it's not easy. Once neural pathways are well established, like after the age of 26, about 55% of them established between 22 and 26. They're not easy, but we always can. Some of us will find it easier to be agile than others, but not impossible.
And I agree. We have a personality profile for a remote or mobile worker. Some people are predisposed to have an easier time with it, and some people will struggle more with working away from the traditional office. And then most of us are somewhere in between, where a mix of time in the office and time remote and being mobile is the ideal for the majority. But you can't change personality as easily, but you can learn behaviors to mitigate your personality and to become better at it.
Bronwyn?
I think, though, we need to really think about what agile means, right? And so for me, agile isn't working from home or being out of the office all day. So if I can give you an example, right? So tonight, I'm missing it because I'm here, but my daughter swims competitively. So it may mean that I'm up in the morning, cup of coffee in my hand, and I'm going through my emails and planning my day. And then I'm on, maybe my husband does drop off, and maybe I get into the workplace early because I know that I want to leave, right? So I'm there for kind of core business hours, do what I need to do, collaborate with my team, get done what I need to do. Then I need to beat traffic, and I need to get home, and I need to pick up my daughter from school, and I need to get her to the pool. And then when she's swimming for an hour and a half, I'm working again off of my iPhone, sitting in the hot, humid pool, whatever, right? And then, I'll go home. I'm living my purpose now, right? And then maybe I have to catch up because I had to leave work a couple of hours early because the traffic getting from Toronto to Oakville at any point in the day now is a good hour and a half. Mm-hmm. And so I now need to catch up. So that is not working from home. That is working in a way that works for me to get done what I need to get done in that day. And so I think we just need to think differently about what agile means. And I think organizations and employees need to think differently about what it means, right? And that's allowing me as a mom, as an employee, right, to be my best self. Because I know that I'm there for my daughter, I'm there for, and I'm making the best use of my time. So that, to me, is really agile, not the whole piece that I wake up and I spend my whole day working from home or, half a day in a coffee shop. So I hope that just gives a little different perspective.
I think so. And does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Yes?
Thank you. One of the values I get out of being in the office is these not scheduled meetings, but kind of encounters in the elevator, in the meeting room, in the cafeteria. Hey, now that you're here, can I ask you a question? Or I've been thinking about calling you, or something like that. But they haven't actually called me, they've just been thinking about calling me. And then we turn out to have a great conversation about some topic that's actually really relevant, and it might change the course of a particular plan they were working on.
So how do you make sure people are productive and engaged, as you said, when you're separated?
So I know what I do, and I would just drop someone an IM, right? Hi, was thinking about you, and just engage in a conversation as if I was in the office with them. And I think, one of the other things that I think is really important to realize is, we talked about the structured meetings and building in that regular touch base, but you also need to have the flexibility and be able to tell your colleagues, your teams, whomever, look, like stuff happens. And if you need to reach me, it may look like I'm in back-to-back meetings all day, but here's how you can reach out to me. And I think it becomes a little bit more difficult when you are working agile or remotely from your teams. But I think, one of the things that we do within my team is I've never given my team access to social media before, like my Facebook page as an example. I'm friends with everybody that works in the New York office because that allows me to see what they're doing and to build a rapport and be able to spark those conversations. But it's all based on, what you're comfortable with. But I think you just need to put yourself out there. And if I've got 5 minutes in the day, often I'll just send somebody a quick message, even if there's no point to it, but it's just to kind of mimic what I would be doing passing somebody in the hallway.
And I think tools like Slack allow for that, right? To have different channels for that informal encounter, that office banter, that social stuff that can lead to those impromptu conversations. And tools like LinkedIn. I mean, I've had lots of encounters on LinkedIn that it just happens that it leads to a good conversation on a topic, right?
Yeah.
Lots of tools out there, right? Skype, sometimes we use Skype, sometimes it's Slack, email, whatever. But I think, the question I have for you is like, if you're thinking of calling that person, why not make that call? If it's important to you, why not make that call? If it's not important, then maybe you just forget about it.
I think the challenge is that it's my presence that inspired the conversation in the first place. So not being present doesn't trigger the conversation, right? And so when you're remote, you can't physically be present, obviously. So that's kind of the context of the question. People reach out to me all the time. They instant message me all the time. We've got all those tools in place. But being present sometimes goes, oh, I've been meaning to ask you something. Just being there inspires that.
So it's the out of sight, out of mind.
And I think, we're talking about the revolution of work here, and I'm all for working from home, working remotely, but I think there is a balance. I value that face time too. I don't think it should be 100% home or 100% at the office. Depends on your role, depends on your company and your job function. Somewhere in between is the right answer.
And your personality.
Yes.
That's true.
That's true.
If I can, I was just going to comment on your comment, sir, because I've seen in other organizations, and I've worked with a variety of different types of organizations, and in particular, for example, Autodesk. What they've done now with their younger employees is bring them into hubs, but what they do is have the camera on, so they actually can see. So it's that notion, because as you said, it was just because they saw you, it sparked their thinking. And unless we were physically there, we challenged to have, again, exactly, have them top of mind. So they've done things where videos on all the time, where maybe it's in a larger group, people are walking by, there's trying to mimic this sense that that person's always there, even if you're not working with them. It seems a little creepy, frankly, to me sometimes a bit. Like, I'm not sure I'd want to sit there and work knowing that there's a camera on me. But they don't have any issues at all. Younger people love it, and then they're constantly instant messaging or chatting. But I think for a leader, then they can just sort of pop in and they have that visual, and knowing that maybe there's people across the country, around the world, that are seeing that. Like, oh, hi, I'm just here in the office, and it's like, oh, Bob, I had a great idea for you, or could I ask you that question? Right. So it's never going to replace the bumping into somebody, but I've heard that works really well.
Okay, so you've been a great audience. Thank you so much for your contributions, and thank you so much for our great panelists for everything that you have shared with us. This has been truly inspiring, and I know you're taking lots away from this. It's giving you lots to think about. I know you'll leave here with insights, but you may also want to speak with a few people after you leave here. So you can connect with Damon Topley or Nori Davidson from Third Octet, Michael Stelmack or Jing Mack from Citrix, or with any of the panelists or with me, and you can, probe into some of this a little bit further. So the conversation doesn't stop here, it continues. The top 3 insights that I would like to leave you with today are, I think the topic of trust came up a whole lot. The topic of leadership changing, and in fact, leadership, there are many facets to it. The old common sense approach still works. FaceTime still works, being with people. But also there's a new shift towards everyone being a leader and contributing, and we have to be open to all of that. And the third part of it is you've got to have the right tools to support your organizational strategy. So I'm sure we'll have lots of fun now kind of talking about all these things. So I just want to hand it over to you, Nori. Mm-hmm.
Please join me in thanking Marguerite, Ching, Laura, Bob, Gail, and Bronwyn. What an amazing panel discussion. That time just flew right by. I mean, I just cannot believe, right? And Bob, we're going to chat here. Yes, I have some questions for you. I'd like to also thank the team here at Ryerson. What a great venue for supporting us. And a lot of work goes on behind the scenes in pulling something like this together. And I want to do a big shout out to Colleen Cronin and Aaron Brennan, a Third Octet marketing team who really do a lot of work in behind the scenes to make all of this work for all of us.